Benefit from a share of $8 million of British aid following the removal of President Zain al-Abidine bin Ali. Nazanin Mushiri reports.
He's the highest profile international figure to visit Tunisia since Ben Ali fled. British Foreign Minister William Hague says he met with the acting Prime Minister and young Tunisians who took part in the protests. A lot of the young people you're talking about are probably wondering now why Britain was so reticent to speak out against Ben Ali's regime for 23 years, but now you're showing solidarity with the Tunisian people.
There is an opportunity here for a real change in the relationship with Tunisia. You can see the change already. The British Foreign Secretary is here. That hasn't happened in a very long time. That didn't happen under the previous administration here, the previous regime here. So we are treating Tunisia differently in this situation. And that's clearly a very important and intentional change.
Britain is keen to establish a working relationship, though it's unclear how much economic help it can offer. Weeks of instability in Tunisia may amount to a loss of $8 billion. A new emergency law passed by Parliament on Monday gives the interim president powers to deal with the economy and set an election date.
People went to the street for change. People went to the street for reform, and now they are very eager to see this reform they asked for.
The European Parliament has called for an international donors conference for Tunisia, and the Tunisian government has asked the EU for a short-term assistance programme to help it through its political transition. But that progress can't come until there's security. The situation is still tense here on the streets of the capital and in other parts of the country. The Tunisian Defence Ministry has recalled recently retired troops in response. Nazanin Moshiri, Al Jazeera, Tunis.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has appeared in a UK court for the second day of an extradition hearing. Assange is wanted in Sweden for questioning over allegations of sexual assault, but his lawyers say if he's extradited, he could be sent to the US to face separate charges related to the leaking of classified documents. Lawrence Lee has more on that story.
Extradition hearings demand that the accused has to find a reason why he shouldn't be sent for trial. And so Julian Assange's defence team has sought to find experts to undermine the case against him. Much of the focus of this has been on the conduct of the Swedish prosecutor Marianne Nee. She isn't here, but is central to the case. Despite much criticism of her conduct, evidence emerged of the efforts she claimed to have made to speak to Assange before resorting to a European arrest warrant. On September the 21st, Marianne Nee first contacted Julian Assange via his lawyer, and an interview was arranged for the 28th. By the 27th of September, Assange couldn't be reached, so officials issued a domestic arrest warrant. That same day, Assange left Sweden. On October the 4th, Assange was due in Stockholm but failed to turn up. Between October the 5th and the 12th, attempts were made to contact Assange by SMS, but there was no reply. According to the Swedish prosecutor, Assange was told he wasn't a wanted man and that he wasn't at risk of arrest if he flew back to Arlanda Airport in Stockholm. Indeed, he was even offered the choice of attending an interview discreetly so the media wouldn't find out about it. They said it must have been crystal clear to him from the 27th of September when he left Sweden that they were extremely anxious to interview him over the rape claims. During this period, Assange was known to be travelling widely, preparing the massive bundle of State Department leaks, raising the question of how motivated he would have been to spend time answering questions back in Sweden. Assange's lawyer, though, argued that he'd been receiving death threats from America and, far from being on the run from Sweden, was in hiding for his own safety. And as Assange himself left the court for the day, he continued to insist the Swedish prosecutor had acted unlawfully.
And what we've seen is process abuse after process abuse being revealed for hours and hours. There is not just one senior prosecutor who originally dropped these charges, as we thought, who believed that the case against me in Sweden was wrong, but rather the current prosecutor's deputy also has made those claims.
And there was this challenge to Marianne Nee.
We have seen a prosecutor who has been ready to feed the media with information, but has been unprepared to come here and subject herself to the cross-examination she knows she cannot withstand. I challenge you, Marianne Nye. Marianne Nye, come to London, come on Friday, subject yourself to the cross-examination by Geoffrey Robertson QC.
The case will now resume on Friday. Whatever the outcome, either side can appeal the verdict. In this saga, there is no end in sight. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera, London.
Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard has paid an emotional tribute to those killed in last month's floods. She struggled to hold back tears during a condolence motion in Parliament and became visibly upset as she spoke about a 13-year-old boy who lost his life in the flooding.
The courage it takes for a young boy, 13-year-old Jordan Rice, to say to his rescuers, "Take my brother first." And before that brave rescuer could return, Jordan and Mum Donna were taken by the flood. But the legend of Jordan's amazing courage will go on. A hero in the purest sense of the word.
Well, supporters of former Sri Lankan General Sarath Fonseca have rallied outside his prison on the first anniversary of his detention. Fonseca was jailed last year after being found guilty of misappropriating funds, and he was sentenced to 30 months in jail. He had been a close ally of President Mahinda Rajapaksa until the pair fell out. North and South Korea have met for the first time since 4 people were killed in the shelling of a South Korean island in November. The talks are aimed at easing tensions on the Korean peninsula and kickstarting the stalled North Korean nuclear negotiations. Here's Harry Fawcett from Seoul.
What's in a handshake? Reading the finer points of inter-Korean diplomacy is never easy, but this meeting of colonels at the truce village of Panmunjom certainly appeared less frosty than the last one in September. All the more remarkable given what's happened in the meantime. When North Korean artillery rained down on the island of Yeonpyeong, killing 2 South Korean civilians and 2 Marines last November, there were genuine fears of escalating conflict. North Korea raised the spectre of nuclear war. The South insisted it was ready to fight. Earlier in March, a much greater loss of life on the South Korean frigate Cheonan, 46 killed in a sinking blamed by the South on a North Korean torpedo. Tuesday's talks were the result of a remarkable change in tone from Pyongyang. Since January calling for dialogue, late last month Seoul suddenly agreed, dropping its demand for an apology for the Yeonpyeong and Cheonan incidents. Seoul is demanding, though, responsible measures on the issue from the other side. Both are under pressure from their allies in Beijing and Washington to restart stalled 6-party talks on North Korea's nuclear weapons program. The fact that these talks have taken place is in itself significant, a sign of just how quickly things can change on this peninsula. But as 2 unexpected fatal incidents last year showed, they can change again for the worse just as quickly. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera, Seoul.
An iPhone app has been sanctioned by the Roman Catholic Church to encourage lapsed followers back to the faith. Pope Benedict XVI has emphasized the importance of a Christian presence in the digital world. The app guides Catholics through the act of confession, which involves admitting sins to a priest, usually in a church. You're watching Al Jazeera. These are the stories making headlines. Pro-democracy protests in Egypt pull in the biggest crowds yet in Cairo's Liberation Square. They still want President Hosni Mubarak to go, despite the government's promise of constitutional reforms. But the vice president has warned the demonstrations cannot be allowed to continue for a long time. Meanwhile, the man at the center of the storm tried to give the impression that it was business as usual on Tuesday. Hosni Mubarak welcomed his first foreign guests since the unrest began. He held discussions with the Emirati foreign minister. And the French prime minister has admitted that Mubarak paid for him and his family to go on holiday in Egypt. François Fillon was also provided with a plane to go sightseeing. In other news, a British court hearing on Sweden's request to extradite WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange will resume on Friday. Assange appeared in a UK court for a second day to have the move against him thrown out. He's wanted for questioning in Sweden over allegations of sexual assault. Charles Taylor's lawyer has walked out of the final stages of the proceedings at the UN-backed Special Court for Sierra Leone. He protested after the judges refused to accept a defense document during the former Liberian president's trial. Taylor denies 11 charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Prosecutors at The Hague allege he used terror tactics to secure control of diamond mines in Sierra Leone and used child soldiers as well. Al Jazeera has obtained exclusive footage of the funeral of an Afghan detainee who died in U.S. custody at Guantanamo Bay last week. Awal Ghul was held for nearly 9 years over alleged links to the Taliban and al-Qaeda. According to the U.S. military, he died of apparent natural causes, but his family disputes this. A Chechen separatist leader has claimed responsibility for a suicide bombing that killed 36 people at Moscow's main airport last month. In a video